Welcome everyone to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with my co-host,
Janis, Gillham, Grady. G'day, everybody. Hi, Mark.
Hi, how you doing today, Janis?
I'm doing good. It's a nice day.
It is a nice day, and we're here. We've got a new interview that we're doing here with somebody that you know, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. I just want to remind everybody, please, if you're interested in our stories, please subscribe to our channel, hit that subscribe and like button. You know what to do. And meanwhile, we'll go ahead and get started. So go ahead, Janis. Who's our guest today?
Okay, our special guest today is John McLean, who came to the Apollo in 1970. That's when I first met him. And later on, after he left the Sea Organization and Scientology, I still kept hearing his name, and I kept hearing about his mother as well. So we got a real interesting story here. So let's welcome John.
Hello, thanks for asking me to be part of it. I watch your channel all the time, and I think everybody should, because it's really informative. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you,
thanks
John. Welcome to our channel. Yeah.
Thanks.
And we haven't talked since 1972.
That's true.
So yeah. So this is going to be fun, catching up on things.
Yes, absolutely. So,
well, why don't we get started with just tell us about your history in Scientology. How did your family, or how did you get into Scientology? And you're in Canada, right? You're Canadian?
Yes, Canadian in Canada. Good friend of Jerry Armstrong's, and a number of other people that Janis has obviously mentioned in her 3 books, which are great, very detailed. Anyway, I joined Scientology. I was coerced to start with by my mother, Nan McLean, who basically became quite legendary in her fight against Scientology. We were one of the first groups, and she, the leading lady, that actually came out against Scientology and revealed some of the secrets that nobody knew at the time. And that got us, unfortunately, into some problems with harassment, which I'll go into some detail there. But Mom was very charismatic, and she was looking for truth. And she joined Scientology herself in 1968, and that's a Toronto organization. And she did her best to indoctrinate the rest of the family in the tenets, the beliefs of Scientology at the time. I was a student.
How old were you in 1968?
In 68, I was working back 17.
Okay.
Yeah. So Mom joined the Toronto org, took a number of courses, and really latched into the philosophy and obviously doing the best she could to free the world. And that obviously became the mantra. If we now, of course, know that we were sucked right in as far as the principles, but at the time it was totally intriguing, and Mom jumped in, both feet forward, and convinced virtually the entire family into getting involved in Scientology. My sister did not, and so things progressed from there. I very quickly, because it's a long story, it's better to keep it short. I took a number of courses at Toronto organization, and Mother had already had graduated up the scale as far as taking courses and learning a lot more. I did a lot of reading.
What was Toronto organization like in those days? Were there a lot of people? What was it like?
There were actually Toronto was a bustling organization at the time. And LRH, Hubbard, was very impressed with their work in gaining numbers, membership, obviously creating revenue for the entire organization. And they were considered what we would call an upstat organization at the time.
Yeah, it was one of the larger organizations for sure.
Yes.
Neil Gilbert, the ED at that time?
Pardon me?
Was he Neil Gilbert, the ED at that time?
Yes, he was. Emil was. Brian Lebman was in the Guardian's office. Rosie Lebman, I believe she ended up being your auditor.
I loved Rosie.
Rosie was a wonderful woman. Brian,
yes,
so nice, but
I could never figure that couple out. But yeah, Rosie, I just loved her, and Brian, I didn't get how they got together.
Well, they got together. Obviously, they cared for each other. Anyway, the Toronto org was upstat, and because it was upstat, there was a tour that came, a recruitment tour that actually came from, I believe it was either AOLA or ASHO, I'm not sure which at the time, and it was headed by Hannah Eltringham.
Hannah Eltringham, okay.
Yes, at the time, Eltringham, and very young lady, very presentable, and just intriguing to a few of us who were at the Toronto org for the tour. And basically, I was a student at the time, and we had 13 grades in the province of Ontario. So I was an honor student in grade 13, and just got totally latched onto the concept of, freeing the world, doing good things, as any of us like-minded people did at the time. They got me when they came on the tour, and I signed up, much to the chagrin of my father at the time, and I left school to join the church. Went to LA.
To join the Sioux organization, right?
Yeah, yes. Excuse me. Yes, I was already a church member. So to join the Sioux.
Yeah, that's my story too. I mean, right out of high school, when my senior year in high school, they talked me into joining the Sioux org.
Wow. Well, it was a good talk at the time, and because obviously you and I and many other people were so interested in doing good things, and
right.
It wasn't because we were stupid. It was because we wanted to believe in something that would help humanity. And clearly Hubbard's writings were intriguing. They were totally different. I had read almost all of his books at the time, not his science fiction stuff, but his books at the time before I made the decision to join the Sea Org. And, the tour solidified it. My goodness, my mother was so ecstatic because she was going to have someone in her family joining the Sea Org. At that time, I didn't know whether I was going to the Apollo or wherever. It didn't matter to me at the time.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I know a lot of Catholic families and all that. They raise their kids, and a lot of this is old school Italian families. They're so proud if their children, male children, when they get out of school, want to become priests. You know what I mean? And go to they think, oh, this is going to help, send me to heaven or whatever. So I'm sure your mother must have been very proud too.
Yeah, and again, that's an analogy that's very prominent in comparing joining the Sea Org to, being a priest or joining the priesthood, etc., especially in Catholicism.
Yeah.
So quickly went to Los Angeles, did a whole bunch of security checking information. They looked at my character, my involvement in the community at that point in time, although I was young. And basically, they thought I might be a good candidate to go and join the ship. So there I was at age 17 and a bit, off to the ship. So it was to
the Flagship Apollo. Should I show this photo of you back then?
Sure.
Okay, here's John back in those days.
That's how you looked when I first met you.
Yes, you looked great, along with all of your family, actually, because I had read about your mom, etc., at CC, and it was a totally new environment for me. And of course, when I first met you, I'm not sure whether you were. Yes, I believe you were a messenger then. You
Yeah,
started
I've been
age
in,
14,
I started
15?
in 68 as at 12 years old as a messenger. So when you came aboard, I was 14.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
What year did you come aboard? What year was that you came aboard the Apollo?
February 71.
Okay, February 1971.
Yeah.
And where did you go to the Apollo? I mean, what was that like? I mean, you didn't know where it was, right?
I had no idea. We were trained, of course, in the cover name of the organization, Operation and Transport Corporation, a business management company. So we had to be able to drill and get through hard questioning on who the heck we were. At that point in time, I was given 5 boxes to take to Madrid. I didn't know it was going to be Madrid. I believe that was Foster Tompkins at the time, who was responsible for then getting the new recruits from Madrid to the ship. I was lucky because I actually spoke French, and that was, I don't speak it as well now, but back then it was an advantage in dealing with the area as a second language, because certainly when we went to Morocco, that's French was their second language. So I went from Madrid. Right. Sorry?
Yeah, that's right. French was the second language.
Yeah. So from Madrid, all this is clandestine, of course. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows that the office was there at the time. It was on Calle del Comandante in Madrid. I remember that. And with me was Jerry Armstrong and Susan Meister. Susan Meister.
Oh, Sue Meister. Yeah, I've got to do an episode on her.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
What a shame.
So you weren't traveling alone?
No. And Jerry was Canadian from Calgary, Alberta, and we became great friends. So we go from Madrid to a ferry in Algeciras, Spain, and across to Tangier, Morocco, which is where we first joined the ship. So again, it's awe-inspiring as far as we are concerned. We're going to the Mecca, and we're actually going to be on the same ship as, our mentor, I would say, and some people said our quasi-god leader. I didn't say that, wouldn't, but nonetheless, I believed strongly. So get on the ship.
You were 17, 18 years old, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No, it was just similar for me when I got to fly Clearwater the first time in 76. I saw the penthouse. I said, oh, he's up there. And he wasn't there. Same thing when I got to the Gold Base at Gillham Hot Springs. I saw Bonneview, the house up there. I went, Hubbard's up there. No, he wasn't there. But I was I couldn't wait. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to finally see him and meet him. So I understand the awe that you experienced.
And John did get to see him and meet him.
Oh yeah,
on a number and quite a few occasions. So as a raw recruit, we get put down into the aft bunking area, and I first met Rudy Savage. Wonderful man.
Oh, yeah.
I was on the bottom bunk. He was on the next. We were very crowded in that area. There were probably about 40 of us in that area at the time. So it was very crunched. And Rudy, just a totally down-to-earth person that never changed. And he had been a good friend of L. Ron Hubbard's in DC, I believe, and
yes,
very loyal to him. Not so loyal to Scientology per se, although he never said that. So here I am meeting Rudy for the first time, Stu Moreau, all of it. There were some people that had a persona on the ship, depending on rank, of course, that scared the hell out of you. I mean, quite frankly, here we are, we're brand new, and okay, I'm starting out on the deck crew. And I was obviously interested in ships and traveling, etc. As a young child, I had traveled all over Europe because my father was in the military. So fairly familiar with a lot of the places. Anyway, long story short, got to meet the whole deck crew, of course, worked with them, started courses, and
Was that your first position? Was on the
my
deck
first
crew?
position was a deckhand.
Okay.
And then I guess quickly became external transport in charge, where I would go from the ship to welcome the new people at the airports and bring them. That was where the ship, and when the ship was in proximity to new people coming in. When when the ship was away from a direct connection with Madrid, I would go to Madrid back and forth and bring all of the packages, the money, although it wasn't cash, I don't believe, a lot of negotiables. At that point in time, Scientology was making, a lot of money, $500,000 to $1 million a week coming in. So
I have a question for you, John.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you saw Hubbard on the Apollo? Or
Yes.
your first interaction with him?
Yes, my first interaction was I was walking down to the bow of the ship as we were getting ready to pull out from Tangier to go to Casablanca, I guess it was next. And he, was standing hugely, or he appeared to me and the rest of us to be this, very powerful man, and he was. He didn't introduce himself. I introduced myself, and said, "Hello, sir. Thank you for allowing me to be part of saving the planet." And that was it. I went to the bow of the ship, and we were undoing the lines and proceeding out. Interestingly enough, it didn't just start then, but those of us on the bow crew always used to sing ballads as we were coming out from port or coming into port. And apparently Hubbard liked it, because it's, it was interesting for him to hear us enjoying ourselves, I guess. The old sailor songs, etc. And so that endeared him. Hugh Harrison was involved then. Al, Kate
Bornstein. Yeah.
It was a great group of young people who believed and who were prepared to do anything for Hubbard and to promote Scientology wherever. So it was just a casual meeting with Hubbard at the time. There were many other times where, we had direct communication, some of which was good, and some of it was not. There were a few times when Janis and the Commodore's messengers came down and gave me heck for, whatever Hubbard was upset with at the time.
Do you remember meeting Janis or seeing Janis, or what were your impressions of Janis as a young teenager then at that time?
Well, no, it was interesting because, again, the sexes, quote unquote, weren't an issue in Scientology at the time. It was the rank and what your position was, and how you treated other people was in deference to their position. Of course, Commodore's messengers were like, the king's guard and gospel, and they scared the crap out of us in a lot of cases, because here's Janis at age 14, and here I am, at least 4 years older, and it's like, you stand up straight when they talk to you, and yeah, it was somewhat intimidating and interesting at the same time. Yeah.
Janis, do you remember dealing with John at all on the ship?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I had many message runs to John, and I remember when he didn't come back from leave, and it was like, what? John's gone? He's not coming back?
Well, that was for a good reason in my thinking, and that's towards the end of the story. But I can bring it up now.
No, we'll get
on
to that. Yeah,
okay.
We'll get that.
All right. So as external transport, I was also involved in telexing back and forth to Tompkins with using the old tap telex creator, sending it to Madrid, and then they sent Hubbard's words to every organization around the world, all his requests, all his demands, etc. And
okay, so your setup was that you would send stuff from the ship to Madrid, and then Madrid would send it around the world, like by telex.
Madrid sent it to the OTLs, the
OTLs would then transfer
the
from
relay
there.
points.
Right.
Continental offices, and they would then send from there. Yeah.
Right. The reason I asked John is my first position in the Sea Org in 1977 was working in external communications with Foster Tompkins. He was my first senior. So I'm familiar with the telexes because we had telex rooms and all that sort of stuff. Who was in charge of you at that time when you were doing all the external transport? Do you remember who your senior was?
Well, that was HCO. Wayne Marple, I think it was Wayne.
Oh yeah, Wayne. I remember Wayne. And just so our viewers know, Foster Tompkins is Sterling Tompkins' father. Sterling has his own channel and all that, but when we talk about Foster Tompkins, that's Sterling Tompkins' father. Anyway, go ahead, John.
We also did a video on Foster.
Yeah.
If anyone's interested in looking that up.
So I assume he's no longer involved.
He's
still in. We just told a story when we showed photographs of his time in and stuff, but he's still there.
Wow.
We interviewed Sterling, his son, and also Jeff Hawkins, who had been his best friend. And then I had stories. So we did a video on Foster, who is still in.
Yeah. That's
surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anybody that I would have picked that might have been out, he would have been one of them for sure.
I dealt with him. He was the person who started computerization in Scientology and the Sea Org, and then eventually was the head of the whole computerization of Scientology. But he was years ahead of his time. I called him the Steve Jobs of Scientology because that's what he was. He was a forward thinker, and he was a great person to work for. I loved it when I was working with him.
Great. Well, and that was in external comm, I assume then.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that everything that was in place on the Apollo from a positional standpoint ended up being placed in Clearwater as the
yes.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Well, again, I ended up second job before external comm was construction chief under Bob Dilts, I believe was.
Oh yeah, Bob Dilts.
Yeah, and
he was a gorilla of a man.
He was, yeah, big guy and lots of fun. But here I am knowing diddly squat about construction, and of course Hubbard says that anybody who's a Scientologist can do it. Just do it. Okay, so here I am under his guidance. Building new bunks on the ship because we were expanding, and we tried to find every corner to allow people to come to the ship and berth. So here I've got this arc welder in my hand, not knowing what the hell to do with it. And, he's holding the metal frames in place that I am supposed to weld so that it holds people up on their bunks. And I was fairly quickly, but it was a challenge. But yet you were expected to do it. I mean, Janis, you would obviously lecture people about just do it.
Yeah, and make it go right. I mean, I've done
Yes.
welding myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Anyway, I often to this day wonder if those bunks held up and hope that everybody was safe.
I never heard of them collapsing, so I think you did a good job.
Great. That's fantastic. So then external comm, and I'm really enjoying, learning new things, studying Scientology, of course, doing the courses nightly, and my family at home. The occasional letter came from them, and they had been experiencing some problems in Toronto organization. Brian Levman and Emile, to a certain extent, Gilbert, she felt they were going out of policy in some areas. She was asked to do some uncomfortable things.
Is this your mother?
My
talking
mother,
about your mother?
yes, yeah. And, she was
Sorry,
so,
buddy, this is your mother here. Nan. Her name is Nan McLean.
that's correct. That's from 1973, I believe.
Mhm.
So she was asked to do some things that were against her principles, and that was basically co-signing for people they were regging being getting into Scientology and getting as much money out of them as they could for various courses. She was asked to falsify her income as a co-signer, and she really struggled with that. So that was one of the first things that she kind of fought about with the gang at that point in time. And she just felt that it was wrong, but she was forced to do it. Or, you're out. So that was just one of the things that she was forced to do. But there were many, many others of ethics and that kind of thing that were happening at Toronto Org that Mom felt very strongly and started writing letters to Hubbard about issues after they refused to handle them at the Toronto Org. She tried to go up the lines properly, like we're all taught to do in Scientology. If you don't go up the lines, you get in trouble. So anyway, the long and the short of that was she was ridiculed and started to be harassed at the time within the organization because I was on ship, and they knew that she might have had a bit of a pipeline to me to bring up some of those things. I didn't do that until I went home on leave in April of 1972. Then I found out about a myriad of problems that they were having, or they felt they were having, at Toronto organization, and they asked me to take back what are called knowledge reports. So in Scientology, you're asked to, basically give the information to your upper echelon and, be truthful, of course. And she did that. I took letters back with me when I went back to the ship after leave in May. And in May of 72, I was promoted to third mate, which I guess is HCO in charge, whatever the term
Right.
was.
So you were over personnel and ethics and communication.
Yes. Yeah. So again, for a kid that's just turned 21, right? I'm in that position, and I felt good about it. I did my job, but there were things such as disciplinary actions that you had to take within the organization. If somebody screwed up, you'd end up putting a committee of evidence against them, and that was tough. Some people were, depending on the information provided at the ComEvs, they were not as well handled as they could have been. One of the things that bothered me that I had to do was there were people wanting to leave the ship and exit. And as third mate, I had to actually force them to sign documents saying that they would not attack Hubbard, sue the Church of Scientology, the Sea Org, or anybody. And basically, we instilled the fact in them that they would not be able to function in the real world if they left Scientology. Right. I actually physically had to take the hand of some people and help them sign. And
why? Because they wouldn't sign it, or because they couldn't?
They didn't want to sign. They were afraid. Obviously they were afraid of retribution too, because anybody that left Scientology at the time, if they were in a position of having certain knowledge, they would be harassed. I mean, that was the
right.
You all know, you've been subject.
Oh yeah, after we left. When we were on the ship, I had no clue of that because I never left or dealt with you guys. So I had no clue that you guys were having them sign papers and things.
Yeah, and that was part of the setup of the whole organization, is that each job was insular from the others, so that
right.
The people that knew what was going on were really only the hierarchy, the Commodore staff, certainly Mary Sue, and if it involved guardian activities. So, Mark, I know you changed jobs within the organization, and I'm sure people didn't know what you did.
Oh no, we talk about it all the time on this channel, because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is necessarily doing, and some people, things would happen to them and they had no idea why, and that's one of the reasons why our channel, that helps them to hear what happened on the other side, to help give them some closure on it.
Yeah,
it was all on a need to know basis.
Yeah. And even in the highest positions, you didn't necessarily know everything. That's just the way it was set up. Yeah,
absolutely. So anyway, when I came back to the ship, as I mentioned, after my leave in April of '72, I brought the knowledge reports. Hubbard had been communicating back and forth with my family for almost a year on various policy problems and issues, and whether it was he that actually signed them or Ken Urquhart, I can't attest, because Ken certainly was proficient in being able to sign Hubbard's Love Ron.
Right.
Well, at that time period, those letters were going to Hubbard. Up until September, he got all the mail and the proposed answers. And sometimes he'd cross things out and write in a different answer. But he saw the mail all during that time period.
Okay, well that now makes sense to me, because at one point in time when I passed him by and saluted on the deck, and he said, John, sorry to hear about the problems in Toronto. We're doing our best to handle them. And from him, it was like, oh my goodness, God has spoken and it's going to be fixed. Well,
exactly. Janis, would he have then alerted like one of his staff aides, or would he have sent a message, sent an order to whoever was in charge of Canada to, look into things? I mean, is that the type of thing he would do?
Yes, he would have gone to the Canadian programs chief in management and had them address the situation and take it down the management lines. And there were some missions, and I know Toronto was a booming org back in the early 70s with the Mill Gilbert heading it up. And we were doing the whole OEC FEBC executive training. And so Toronto had like about 5 or 6 guys who came and got all the executive training. Yeah. It was a definite going concern, that org.
It was. And when the trainees came back, of course, they ruled the roost, so to speak. Brian Charlton, was he from Toronto? I think he was.
Brian who? Charlton?
Charlton?
No, he was English.
Ah, okay. Anyway,
yeah.
A number of, quote, prominent Toronto people came, took the FEBC course, and went back. At that point in time, though, here's where the serious issues started with my family, is they became harassed by almost everybody because I was the pipeline direct to Hubbard, and they didn't like it. And yeah, so they were started to be treated very poorly by virtually everybody, and bad jokes were played on them. Jokes, but they weren't really jokes. They were threatened, etc. So again, it became such a problem for them, and I kept obviously putting it on to Hubbard. And normally back then, Hubbard would not, there's a condition called PTS, potential trouble source.
Right.
I'm sure you guys and many other Xers are familiar with. So, I could easily have been identified by Hubbard as a PTS person, and my family, creating the interbulation for me to not be able to do my job. Well, I did my job, and I think I did it well.
You were well respected as the third mate.
Well, it's nice to know.
Yeah.
There were so many good people involved that it was a hard decision to leave. But I wanted to come back and see if I could handle it, because I still believed, God forbid, but I did still believe in the veracity of the organization, the fact that we were going to be freeing the planet, etc. So I asked to be able to go back to handle the quote unquote situation in Toronto, and eventually Hubbard granted it. But remember, all of our passports were locked up.
Right.
On the ship, so we couldn't go anywhere. We were prisoners on the ship, and everybody.
But you know what's? Yeah, you don't think of it that way when you're there about the passports, because the port captain's office needed them to check everybody into that port and then check them out of that port. So that's why it was kept there in one box, so you didn't have to round them up every time we sailed into a port. But it did create a problem of being a prisoner. You're right.
Really, for sure. So, on a number of occasions, there were all sorts of flaps. When I was on the external comm job, I was also responsible for getting the outside world news into the orders of the day. So I was supposed to be getting the news from BBC radio.
Right.
Yep. Okay. And sometimes I was a little bit lazy and took some of the news from the American newspaper, News of the World. And in this particular case, stupidly, because I shouldn't have done it, but that was when Charles Manson was in the forefront, and some places referred to him as a previous member of Scientology.
Yeah.
So I kind of let that out in the orders of the day in the news section, and Hubbard and Mary Sue Hubbard freaked. I mean, they just. So here's, first of all, one of the messengers. It wasn't you, Janis, I don't think.
No.
I think it might have been Terry. Came down and said, "Where the hell did you get this?" And not hell, but where did you get this? Very demanding. LRH is really upset that, first of all, that you would have put it in the oods. Oops. And the long and the short of it was, Mary Sue actually started a lawsuit on behalf of the Guardian's office against BBC, and their first answer to her was, "We didn't do anything. We didn't say this, although we know it to be fact." And they did say that. We didn't do it. So a few months later, I had to admit the fact that, no, I actually got it from a written publication, and I'm extremely sorry. and got a note back from Ken Urquhart, Hubbard's number one, and said, you're forgiven, and Mary Sue is going to call off the lawsuit. So that was my first really bad hiccup with Hubbard directly. There were other situations that are just quirky, like the issue where if he's studying and auditing himself on the ship, if it got bad, he would come up and take over and yell and scream. So for those of us that had any direct contact with him, it was strange for him to be acting that way when he's God. He's not supposed to be like this. He's teaching the world to be clear and not the effect of their own personal issues. And
Right.
Here he was going snaky on us. I mean, Janis, you must have, my God, you must have had some very good examples of his craziness from time to time.
Oh yeah, definitely. But you know what was interesting? If you could assure him that you were going to handle the problem, you could calm him down. And then you just had to make sure you did handle the problem.
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't just his personality as personification. He was somebody that looked like they had power. When he walked around, it was deference to him. Mary Sue, to a certain extent, I was one of the few people that got along with Mary Sue because, speaking of dogs, her dog, Vixie, liked me, and I was one of the few people on the ship that could actually pet her. And Mary Sue she was looking down and saying, "Oh my God."
You patted her?
Yeah.
I never would even try. I was like afraid my hand would get bitten off.
Well, I think that may be one of the reasons that I didn't get kicked off the ship occasionally on a few things. But yeah, I petted her, and she didn't wag her tail, but she let
She
me
had
pet
no
her.
tail.
And Mary
She had a
Sue's
little
eyes
stub.
were just like, "Oh my God!" So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe that made a difference in how I was treated.
Yeah.
But it was known.
That's funny.
It was known by other ship people that I did pet the dog, and it was like, and that dog was a nasty little thing.
Oh, well, they always had the joke that if Vixie barked at you, it meant you had out ethics. So since Vixie was good friends with you, you obviously didn't have out ethics.
Right, I guess. That's interesting. So I guess I wanted to get back, help my family, but at the same time, I'm responsible for third mate activities. And at the time in Morocco, there were attempted coup d'etats, which Janis has written extensively about in, I think it was book 2.
Book 2,
yes.
yes.
One or book 2?
Book 2.
Book 2, that one. Yeah.
Again, she's got all the names right, because as a cover organization, Hubbard and Port Captain's Office and everybody else tried to ingratiate our organization into being friends with and helpful to the government of Morocco. Right. And, it took a while. And at one point, Hubbard had written a program for, because there were certain generals, actually it was the king's sister, I believe, that came on the ship. Janis, do you recall? That,
in Tangier, the princess, yes.
Oh, a princess. Okay, not the sister.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, she was the sister. She was the king's sister.
Oh, okay, but
yes.
the princess.
But she was called Princess whatever, but it was his favorite sister.
Right. So with the cover name and cover organization, we began to get a better name within the hierarchy of the who knows who, including the military in Morocco. And Hubbard's, having people wine and dine them. And there were, Janis, I'm sure you and the other messengers made sure that when there was a clean ship drill, which I also was responsible for as third mate, not one item relating to Scientology could be on display anywhere. And you couldn't say the word. And effectively, Hubbard had written a program, and apparently it was a good program, a management type program that was presented to the Ministry of Agriculture, I believe, to reorganize that section of the Moroccan government. And they started it, and they liked it, and it worked. So here we are getting into 71 and early 72, again, which you wrote about in your book, Janis. There were attempted coups d'etats to remove King Hassan II from power, to the point where I believe you wrote about his jet was chased. It was being escorted, and then one of the escorting jets actually shot
on him. Yeah.
the king's royal plane and penetrated. And then there was a whole issue where one of the higher up people, I don't know whether it was Ufkir or not, that got on the radio, convinced the others that the king was dead, call off the plot.
The king himself did that. He took over as pilot of the plane and told everyone the king was dead.
Right.
And that's how they backed off from him.
I wasn't privy to who had said it, so thank you for correcting that. So they backed off. In mid-flight, they're trying to kill the king. So obviously he landed, I believe, in Rabat. He landed his own plane in Rabat, and immediately got other military to try and catch the people involved. So again, long and the short was that Hubbard saw an opportunity to really, he wanted to control the country. And actually, he said it in the orders of the day at one point. He said, we own quite a bit of property around the world now, and we will be acquiring some countries, referring specifically to Morocco, internally, of course. So anyway, Hubbard comes up with the thought that, okay, we can do the security check and find out who the traitors are within the military. Because they weren't just the Air Force. I mean, this is crazy, right? So,
yeah.
So effectively, one of my jobs, and I think Janis wrote about it, was to interview the auditors who could possibly do a sec check, who spoke decent enough French to be able to conduct the check. Well, they weren't just given carte blanche to do it. What happened was, I don't know that you knew this, Janis, at the time, the king and some trusted people gave 3 people to test first on the sec check. Okay, one of whom they knew was an attempted coup d'etat person, 2 others not. Okay, they did the sec check and they found the guy, identified the guy correctly, that was the guy trying to kill as part of the coup. So they were impressed. So I was given the job of finding the auditors who would go on land and do the security check. Now we all know that the e-meter is not the best
infallible
device. Right. So again, what happened was I picked the people to go and do it. And that is at the same time, and I had total misgivings about doing that. Just I was cringing in my stomach saying, why? This is because I knew the e-meter was so wrong in using that as a tool.
Right. And here we were interfering with the local government.
Yeah, their politics and the government.
Oh, we'll come in and find people who are trying to kill you.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you wouldn't be worried that they'd be killing the auditors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, they were pretty well secured. You're right, though, Mark. Yeah, they didn't, obviously. And this is right around the time where I'm still trying to handle my folks back home. And I really wanted to make things right there. And I was given permission after I picked the auditors that were going to do the sec check. I was finally given permission to go home because I myself failed the security check when they were asking about unkind thoughts towards Hubbard, etc.
Oh.
So I was held back on the ship for 2 months, crashing on various courses that I had to do.
Okay.
Do you remember what your unkind thoughts were?
I do, that it was crazy, that this whole thing was a sham, and that how the hell did I get involved? And this, it was a culmination of this man is not who he says he is. Of course,
what was the turning point for you on that? Because before, I mean, you were doing really well as the third mate and all that. So where did you start going like, wait a second here, this isn't all that it, meets the eye, you know what I mean?
When I was asked to get the people for the security check, because I knew very well that it wasn't as effective as it should be, as a proper lie detector should be. And most of them are pretty reputable because they're done by professionals, not by, auditors of a third world.
Well, yeah, we had auditors that were going to do the sec checks that weren't auditors, but they spoke French. So they were quickly being drilled and trained to, just read it, drill it, do it type of thing to be part of the team.
Yes. So here I am. I know that this is wrong overall, first of all, from a moral standpoint. And secondly, that there's a real possibility that someone who may be found guilty through the sec check may very well not be.
And could be killed, imprisoned or killed or whatever, right?
I have to tell you what happened after that, but that was after I left.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I
left the ship November 9th, 1972, after passing the third security check. And I had made up my mind, I'm not coming back already then. And that's why I didn't pass initially, because all these misgivings, mentally were playing around with the meter and how I reacted to it, which is pretty bogus, because you can make your e-meter float if you want, if you can concentrate. So anyway, I ended up being able to do that. Came home, realized how bad it was back home with the situation with my family and the Scientology in Toronto. And then I started reading some alternative stuff. And I couldn't work. I was just, I was a nervous wreck. On the 14th of January, 1973, I read in our Toronto Globe and Mail that 13 Moroccan officers were executed.
Oh.
As a direct result.
That was about 5 weeks after we packed up and got out of the country as fast as we could, because it exposed to the person on the list who was the head of the coup.
Because the harassment started against us immediately from the Church of Scientology of Toronto, we went to the police, the RCMP, and eventually to Interpol, who we told the story to, and that was one of the reasons that pressure was put on them to get the hell out of Morocco.
Right.
So I'm proud of the fact that, we did that to start with, but I just, when we did the Going Clear Toronto show, that was my biggest regret in all of Scientology, was having done that. And
I understand.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a good point for us to end this episode, and then we can do our part 2 about you being back in Canada and your mother and what all happened there on the
That's
next
when the
one.
harassment
Okay with you?
started.
Yeah. Is there anything else though, before we go to our business and stuff? Anything else on the ship that you wanted to relay, or any other stories briefly that you wanted to mention?
There may be within the harassment business. There will be.
Okay.
There were people on the ship. Sorry.
John, were you the third mate when Rudy Savage did his mutiny?
No, it happened after, and there's a question about dates exactly as to when it happened, and I would have helped Rudy in a minute had I been there.
Well, everyone did help him, but yeah, Stu Moreau's going to come on, and I'm going to talk to him about it.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
great.
Yeah,
that'll be
fun. That'll be a fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it will.
Well, I wanted to mention, in the next part that we do, we'll be talking about your time back in Canada, and of course your mother, who spoke out quite seriously against Scientology. She was like one of the early people speaking out in the public, in the news, in Canada, back in the early 70s. And
Yes.
She became a target of harassment by the Guardian's office and Scientology. And we're going to cover all of that in our next part 2 episode here with John. So people can look forward to that. Okay.
Great.
Anyway, we want to mention a couple of things just business wise. Please subscribe to our channel if you've enjoyed this story, and other stories are like this or on our channel. So we'd appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button, rock slam the like button, as Janis likes to say. And and hit the notification button so you know when new videos come out. Also, if you have any questions or comments about what we just went over with John, please go in the comment section, ask any questions, make any comments. What do you think about, all this subject that we're talking about? We're interested in what you have to say, and we always answer the questions and comments. So we wanted to mention that. And then finally, I wanted to mention, if you feel like donating to our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link down below in the video description. Just click on that link. It tells you how to do it. You can buy us a coffee. It's a way of supporting the channel. And we appreciate everybody who has supported us in the past, and also hopefully people who support in the future. So you can buy us a coffee there. And I wanted to mention, we mentioned Janis's book. Here's book 1, Commerce Messenger. That's her when she was like 13, probably about a year before you met her, John, right?
Yes.
That's on the Flagship Apollo. And then part 2, book 2, covers this whole Moroccan incident in Janis's book in detail. So you can get autographed copies of those at our merchandise store. Just go to the store link and click on it. And in the U.S., we'll mail it to you in the U.S. In the non-U.S., it's too expensive for us to send it out. But if you're in the U.S., we can definitely do that. You can order the book. Janis autographs it. Go ahead, Janis.
Yeah, but they can also get book 1 in Audible on Amazon.
Okay, so if you have Amazon, you can order it on there as well in audio, book 1 in Audible format. Anyway, so we just want to mention that too. Anyway, has anybody got anything else that they would like to say, Janis, before
John,
we
it has been fun talking with you. I'm enjoying this.
Well, wait until we get into the harassment, because it's class.
Yes.
Yeah, your stories like ours and everybody else, there's a good part, and then it's like, I'm getting the hell out of here, and then the harassment begins. It just seems like that seems to be the pattern with a lot of the stuff. But we appreciate you talking about your time on the Apollo and meeting Hubbard and meeting Janis and all that. And we'll carry on. We'll do part 2 shortly, and people will be able to see that as well. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Until
Thanks,
the next
John.
time, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you
Bye.
later. Bye-bye.